Hi, my name's Chloe, and I used to be like everybody else. When I was 17, I had everything that I could want or need, but I decided to throw it all away with a life of drugs, alcohol, sex, and breaking all the rules. At midnight tonight on the 31st of December 2018 will mark 11 years since I threw it all away and destroyed my life forever. I took it one step too far, and that one step was the last step I ever took. On New Year's Eve 2007, I was drinking at the local pub until they kicked me out when they found out I was underage. And I went home. I lived just around the corner in an upstairs flat that looked out onto the main street, just outside the pub. So I went out onto my balcony, I climbed over the railings, I walked along the roof and climbed onto the brick awning. I was walking along the awning and I slipped. I fell, I split my skull open, I broke my neck, I broke my back, I broke my sternum, I broke both my femurs, I broke my wrist, and I broke my nose. So I was lying on the concrete, unconscious, outside the pub, bleeding internally, and everybody that was drinking at the pub saw me. At 17, I stopped breathing, my heart stopped completely, and for about half an hour before the ambulance came, I was dead. Then when the ambulance came, my heart was restarted with a defibrillator, and I was taken to the Orange Base Hospital, which was about 20 minutes drive away from where this happened. Once I was semi-stable at the hospital, I was airlifted by Care Flight helicopter to the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney, where I was placed under an induced coma for 3 weeks. My dad was working in Victoria at the time, so he got a phone call a bit after midnight saying that his daughter was in an accident and he had to drive something like 7 or 8 hours to get to Sydney, not knowing if I was alive. While I was in a coma, I developed a subdural hematoma, which is bleeding and swelling in the brain. My skull had to be drilled to relieve the pressure in my brain. And my parents were given the option to turn the life support off, because the best case scenario, if I was to wake up, I would be severely brain damaged and paralyzed from the neck down. And obviously nobody wants that for their daughter, but my dad had faith that I would be okay. And even though my end diagnosis is not the greatest, it's better than the alternative. After 5 weeks in intensive care, I was taken to surgery, where I was operated on for about 12 hours. Both femurs had started to set out of place while I was in a coma, so my legs had to be rebroken and titanium rods were put into my legs from my knees to my hips. They did a spinal fusion, which is basically setting my neck in place. So now I have 6 plates down the back of my neck to hold my neck together. But there wasn't much that they could do about everything else. My wrist was put into a brace, but that's pretty much all they could do. Apparently, Humpty Dumpty can't be put back together again. Not completely anyway. After the 5 weeks in intensive care, I started my rehabilitation at other hospitals in Sydney. Because of my brain injury, I had to learn everything all over again. I had to learn how to talk, because when I had the trachea in my neck, I couldn't say anything. So when they took the trachea out, basically I was just speaking gibberish. I couldn't communicate. My brain was that badly damaged that everything sort of came out scrambled. Put every single word in a blender and that's what I was saying. I don't know what I was saying. I knew that I was trying to communicate something, but nobody could understand what I was saying. So I had to learn how to write again. My hands had to learn how to move again. My left hand is my gimpy hand. I can not do much with this hand. My right hand was the one I broke. I still have a lot of pain in it, but it works semi-decently. I had to learn how to read again. I had to learn how to communicate with people. Even general verbal communication was extremely difficult for me. I had to learn names of people. I couldn't remember my parents' names. I had to learn my friends' names. I had to learn the names of objects and colors and places, and it was extremely frustrating. When I had my accident, I damaged the optic nerve in my brain, so my right eye is half blind. And I also have double vision, and my eyesight is really, really bad. And I still have trouble verbally communicating to people. If I'm trying to get my point across, it's really hard for me to form the words to say what I want to say. It took about 7 or 8 months until I could feed myself again. It took me about 3 or 4 years for me to be able to communicate with people. After spending 12 months in hospital, I moved into my dad's place, and this was when I had to learn everything in a wheelchair. It was a completely different life, because before this, I was living by myself. I was breaking the rules. I could do anything I wanted, and I didn't care about the consequences. But now, this is my consequence. I can't walk anymore, and I have limited verbal skills and limited use of my hands and my arms. That one mistake and that step too far was the last step I ever took. And I now am sober. I do not drink anymore. And this New Year's, I'm not saying don't drink. Go out, have a good time, but please remember my story. You only live once, so please think twice. Have fun, stay safe, and I'll see you next year.